Well, there's three other races going on in the Sunshine State, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hey, it's Matt Mitchell with Red County doing another edition of Election Pulse Florida, and we're going to be focusing on the three open cabinet races here in the state of Florida, races that were made open by the surprising but somehow not surprising announcement that Governor Charlie Crist would run for the United States Senate rather than seek re-election to the governor's seat. This has triggered off a series of vacancies and the other three elected cabinet positions in Tallahassee, partly because two of them are running to replace Governor Crist. The Democratic Chief Financial Officer, Alex Zink from Tampa, is running for the Democratic nomination and appears to be the anointed candidate. And same with Attorney General Bill McCollum, a Republican from Seminole County, who decided that he would give running for a statewide office one last shot in 2010. Both were in their first terms in their respective positions, and now will be running and leaving their offices vacant. And which means there are three other cabinet positions. The first is the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and that was held by Republican Charles Bronson of Kissimmee. He was term limited and thought about running for governor, but he was kind of discouraged out of that race by state party officials, and he did not formally close the door to running, but it seems like he's going to be losing a lot of time making up his mind, and he will probably stick to his word that he is not going to run. Running in his place to take his place are two Republicans. One is U.S. Congressman Adam Putnam from Bartow in Polk County, which is sort of a famous center for a lot of famous Florida politicians, and he is a pretty ambitious guy. He was going to be Speaker of the House at some point down the line, but the Democratic takeover of Congress and a desire on his part to come back to Florida. He was originally a state legislator from Bartow before getting elected to Congress, and I think he always kind of preferred Tallahassee to Washington, D.C., and I think it seems like he's going to try to head back to Tallahassee for good to run for Agriculture Commissioner and then maybe run for governor somewhere down the line. Running against him in the Republican primary is State Senator Cary Baker. He is from Eustis in Lake County, which is also the home of the contemporary Christian music band Fireflight, which is a really good band, by the way. But he is running to be, I guess, something of a conservative critic of Putnam, someone who can run to the right and claim with an agriculture and business background to run against Putnam. So that could be a competitive primary, but Putnam has already raised more money in about 2 or 3 months than Baker has in the past year, and it may be a situation where Baker may just not be able to compete, but there hasn't been a whole lot of external polling done about this, so it remains to be seen how that's going down. Whether Putnam can run against Washington while still being a part of it, and whether Baker can raise the money to raise his name recognition and be a viable critic of Putnam and a viable candidate to win in the general election. But there doesn't seem to be a whole lot to worry about for either candidate. Whoever wins the primary doesn't look to have too much of a issue beating whoever the Democrats put up today. Eric Draper, the head of the Audubon Society of Florida, did announce that he would be running to seek the Democratic nomination, but it doesn't look like they're going to be recruiting anybody too great to go up against. So that I would prognosticate, if I would be into predicting, that it would be a Republican hold. It's just a question of whether it's going to be Baker or Putnam who wins. The next office is Chief Financial Officer, and there are several candidates on the Democratic side and one potentially anointed candidate on the Republican side, and that is going to be Senate President Jeff Atwater. He is a banker from the Miami area, very capable fundraiser. He was in the mix to run for Senate where Crist's name was dropped, but he settled for this position running, and he should be well financed to fight off any primary challengers, and I would favor him for the most part to win in the general election, depending on who the Democrats come up with. One of the big names that's being floated around is former congressional candidate Annette Taddeo of the Miami area. She ran against Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen in 2008 and kind of underperformed. The DCCC had put some money behind her, ran some ads in the Miami media market, but she only managed 42% of the vote in a pretty Democratic area of the state, and while raising a bit of money on her own. So while she does some positives about her, electoral history suggests that she may be the best candidate. It may not be the candidate that Democrats are looking for replace Mrs. Sink, CFO. And the other office is Attorney General, and that's the interesting one. Lieutenant Governor Jeff Kottkamp was considered a prime candidate for this, but the issue with him is he has some travel problems, travel expense problems. When he flew around the country and around the world with Governor Christ, there were some issues about what he used his lieutenant governor's expense account for, what he wrote off or tried to get reimbursed for, and that's something that may come back to haunt him if he's trying to run for head of the state justice department. There are some other names that were floated around. One was Charlie Crist's former chief of staff, George Lemieux, but he dropped out last week. And Bill Galvano, a state representative from Bradenton, who may run. He is a private practice attorney and was chairman of the House Rules Committee this past session of the Florida State House. He doesn't have quite the name recognition, but he is a capable fundraiser, and he is well connected in South Florida to some big names like Senator Mike Bennett and former Senate President John McKay, so he may be able to get a good start. But if Jeff Kottkamp runs, I would not anticipate him running against him in a primary. Kottkamp would be the odds-on favorite. However, as someone who has some scandal attached to him, that may make the seat competitive for the Democrats, who have not had a Democratic Attorney General in some time. Bob Butterworth, I believe, was the last Democratic Attorney General back in the 90s, and they have some names. Dave Ehrenberg, a state senator from the Tampa area, has an exploratory committee, and he is starting to fundraise. But the wild card in the room for that seat is going to be State Senator Dan Gelber. He's currently running for Senate, but he had a very underwhelming fundraising quarter in quarter one. This was mainly because he was in Tallahassee a lot of the time, but at the end of the day, Kendrick Meek outraised him by quite a bit for that Senate race, and there's a little bit of buzz going around that he may have over to the Attorney General race or some other cabinet race, feeling that he won't need to raise as much and he can still be competitive against somebody. But Ehrenberg would be a pretty strong opponent in a primary, and he could be viable for the Democrats statewide. He is a well-liked person in the Democratic establishment, and he is a capable fundraiser. But that remains to be seen, and Gelber does remain the wild card because he is also very well-liked. He's very much an inside baseball kind of guy, and that may be somebody the Democrats would put their trust in. But again, that's going to be a little while off, and we'll just see what happens as he makes up his mind. So there we have it. Next week, when we do another edition, I'll start looking at some competitive state house races, both in the Miami area, the Florida Senate races, and just an update on the special election going on the Treasure Coast between Ken Pruitt and Art Argenio. News sources are reporting that former state representative Argenio will be dropping out of this race probably sometime this week, which leaves former state representative Joe Negron unopposed in the primary for now, which will be held on June 30th, and he will be facing one of a couple Democrats in the area who probably will not win. And he should be set to get elected on August 4th to replace former Senate President Ken Pruitt. So that's the news for today. Thanks for watching Election Pulse Florida. I'm Matt Mitchell. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye-bye.